The gunshot still echoed through the canyon as Ryder Zimmerman dropped to his knees beside his dying wife, her blood staining the parched earth beneath them. 3 pairs of terrified eyes watched from the wagon his sons, who would soon have only him to rely on in this harsh, unforgiving territory of the Wyoming Territory, 1878. "Promise me you'll keep them safe," Mary whispered, her breath shallow as life slipped away. "Promise me they'll grow up good men." "I promise," Ryder choked out, cradling her face in his rough, calloused hands. "I promise." When she was gone, Ryder buried her near their homestead with nothing but the howling wind and the confused sobs of his boys for company. Standing over the fresh mound of earth, hat pressed to his chest, he wondered how a former cavalry officer could possibly raise 3 young boys alone on the edge of civilization. But promises were sacred in the West, and Ryder Zimmerman had never broken one. 5 years later, the daily struggle hadn't gotten much easier. The small ranch Ryder had built 12 miles from Cottonwood Springs was modest, but sturdy, a testament to his determination to provide stability for his sons. At 38, his face was weathered from sun and sorrow, dark brown hair now threaded with silver at the temples, but his blue eyes remained sharp and vigilant. "Samuel, Jeremiah, where's your brother?" Ryder called as he strode toward the house, his boots kicking up dust. He'd spent the morning mending fences along the north pasture, leaving 14-year-old Samuel in charge of his younger brothers. Samuel appeared at the door, lanky and serious beyond his years. "Pa, Daniel's under the bed again, won't come out." Ryder sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. What happened this time? Same as always. Something spooked him. At 10 years old, Daniel was the most sensitive of the boys, while 12-year-old Jeremiah thrived in the outdoors, showing an uncanny knack for tracking and hunting that impressed even the local Shoshone. Daniel preferred books and quiet contemplation. He was also haunted by memories of the day they lost Mary, memories that sometimes sent him seeking dark, enclosed spaces where he felt safe. "I'll talk to him," Ryder said, stepping into the cabin. Inside, the main room served as kitchen and gathering space, with 2 small bedrooms off to the side, one for Ryder, and one shared by the boys. Everything was functional but sparse. A rough-hewn table with 4 mismatched chairs, a stone fireplace with an iron pot hanging above, and shelves lined with essential provisions. Mary's rocking chair sat in the corner, the only piece of furniture that Ryder kept polished to a shine. He ducked into the boys' room where Jeremiah was sitting cross-legged on the floor, peering under the bed. "He won't listen to me, Pa," Jeremiah reported, frustration evident in his voice. "I told him the storm's passed, but he says it ain't the thunder." Ryder knelt down, his knees protesting the movement. "Daniel, son, can you come out and talk to me?" a small voice answered from the darkness. "There were men, Pa, men with guns like before." Ryder's spine stiffened. "Where did you see men?" "From the hill, when I was collecting kindling." They rode past on the north trail. Ryder exchanged a glance with Jeremiah, who nodded confirmation. "I saw dust rising from there earlier, Pa, thought it was just travelers." "Come out now, son," Ryder said, his voice gentle but firm. "No one's going to hurt you here." "I promised your ma I'd keep you boys safe, remember?" Slowly, Daniel emerged, his dark hair tousled and eyes red-rimmed. Ryder pulled him into a hug, feeling the boy's racing heartbeat against his chest. He wished, not for the first time, that Mary were here to provide the softness these boys needed, the tender words that seemed to catch in his throat. "Samuel, take your rifle and keep watch from the west window," Ryder instructed. "Jeremiah, help Daniel wash up, then we'll get supper started." Supper was a quiet affair: beans, cornbread, and some salted venison from last month's hunting trip. The boys ate hungrily. Growing boys always seemed to be starving, but conversation was minimal. Ryder's mind kept returning to Daniel's sighting. Strangers on the North Trail could be harmless travelers, but experience had taught him caution. The Zimmerman Ranch wasn't on the way to anywhere in particular, which meant visitors were either lost or had specific business in the area. "Tomorrow I'll ride into town for supplies," Ryder announced, breaking the silence. "Samuel, you'll come with me. Jeremiah and Daniel will stay and mind the place." Samuel straightened, pride evident in his posture. Being chosen for town visits was a coveted privilege. "Can I bring my book to trade at Mr. Thornton's store?" Daniel asked, his earlier fears temporarily forgotten at the prospect of new reading material. "We'll see," Ryder said, not wanting to make promises he couldn't keep. Money was tight and necessities came first. "For now, let's get these dishes cleared." Later, after the boys were asleep, Ryder sat in the doorway with his Winchester across his lap, watching the moonlit landscape. The vast Wyoming Territory stretched before him, beautiful and deadly in equal measure. 5 years they'd been here, carving out an existence from the stubborn earth, building a life from the remnants of tragedy. 5 years of backbreaking work, of teaching his sons to be both tough and honorable, of falling into bed each night too exhausted to fully feel the absence of his wife's warmth beside him. Dawn came early, as it always did. Ryder rose before the sun, stoked the fire and put coffee on to boil. The familiar routine was comforting: feed the horses, check the chicken coop for eggs, wake the boys, oversee their morning chores. "Samuel, saddle up Brutus," Ryder instructed after breakfast. "We'll leave within the hour." As they prepared to depart, Ryder gave Jeremiah strict instructions. "Keep the rifle loaded but out of sight unless needed. Bar the door if anyone approaches. We'll be back before sundown." The 12-mile ride to Cottonwood Springs took them through rolling prairie dotted with sagebrush and occasional stands of cottonwood trees that gave the town its name. Samuel rode well, sitting tall in his saddle, eyes constantly scanning the horizon as Ryder had taught him. "Pa," Samuel said after they'd ridden in companionable silence for several miles, "do you ever think about moving back east, to where there's more people?" Ryder considered the question. "This is our home now, son. We've put too much of ourselves into that land to abandon it. But wouldn't it be easier, for all of us?" "Easier isn't always better," Ryder replied. "Out here, a man learns to stand on his own 2 feet. Learns the value of hard work and looking his neighbor in the eye." He paused, studying his eldest son's profile. "Is something troubling you?" Samuel shrugged. "Just thinking about Daniel and how Ma would have known what to do for him." The truth of it cut deep. Mary had been the heart of their family, the softness to Ryder's rough edges. Without her, he constantly felt as though he was failing his boys in some fundamental way, especially Daniel. "Your mother was special," he agreed quietly, "but we make do with what we have, not what we wish for." Cottonwood Springs came into view around midday, a dusty main street lined with false-fronted buildings, hitching posts, and wooden sidewalks. Though small, the town served as a vital hub for the surrounding ranches and homesteads, offering supplies, mail, and occasional news from the wider world. They tied their horses outside Thornton's general store, and Ryder was immediately struck by the unusual number of horses already hitched there. Inside, the store was crowded with locals gathered in tight clusters, voices low and serious. "Zimmerman," Harold Thornton greeted him from behind the counter. "Heard about the trouble?" "What trouble?" Ryder asked, instantly alert. "Stage was robbed yesterday, 10 miles east. Driver killed, passengers roughed up pretty bad." Thornton leaned closer. "Word is it was the Blackwell gang. They've been working their way north from Colorado." Ryder felt a chill. The Blackwell gang was notorious 4 brothers and their associates who had left a trail of violence across 3 territories. If they were in the area, that explained the riders Daniel had spotted. "Sheriff's putting together a posse," Thornton continued. "Thought you might want in, being ex-cavalry and all." "Can't leave my boys," Ryder said firmly, though part of him, the part that remembered the discipline and purpose of his military days, was tempted. "Just need my supplies and whatever mail might have come." As Thornton filled his order, Ryder kept Samuel close, acutely aware of the tension in town. News of outlaws always brought out both the best and worst in communities, men eager to protect their own, but also prone to rash decisions and misplaced bravado. They were loading supplies onto their packhorse when Sheriff Mills approached, his silver star catching the afternoon sun. "Zimmerman, got a minute?" Ryder nodded to Samuel to continue the task and stepped aside with the lawman. "Heard about the stage robbery." "Bad business," Mills agreed grimly. "Got 2 passengers still laid up at Doc Weber's place, but that's not why I'm seeking you out." He glanced around before continuing. "Got word from a trapper who came through yesterday that he saw a small camp up near Fork Creek. 3, maybe 4 men, keeping to themselves but well armed. Fork Creek was less than 5 miles from Ryder's ranch." "Could be hunters," Ryder suggested, though he didn't believe it. Mills shook his head. "Trapper said one matched Blackwell's description, tall, red-bearded fellow with a burn scar on his neck. Why come to me with this? You're forming a posse." "Posse is heading east, following their trail from the stagecoach, but if I'm right and they've split up." Mills let the implication hang. "Just wanted you warned, being out there with those boys of yours." Ryder clapped the sheriff on the shoulder. "Appreciate it, we'll keep our heads down." But as they rode home, tension sat like a stone in Ryder's gut. If the Blackwell gang, or even part of it, was camped near Fork Creek, they were too close for comfort. Men like that were unpredictable. They might pass through without incident, or they might decide a small ranch with minimal defenses looked like easy pickings. The sun was lowering toward the western mountains when they crested the final hill overlooking their valley. Ryder reined in sharply, his arm shooting out to stop Samuel as well. "Pa, what?" Samuel began, but fell silent when he followed his father's gaze. Smoke was rising from their chimney, more smoke than there should be if Jeremiah had merely kept the cooking fire going. And there, hitched outside their cabin, was a horse Ryder didn't recognize. "Stay here," Ryder ordered, drawing his revolver. "If you hear shooting, ride hard for town." "Pa, no, that's an order, son." Leaving Samuel with the packhorse, Ryder rode toward the cabin at a careful walk, keeping to the cover of trees where possible. As he drew closer, he caught the scent of something unexpected: fresh baking. His confusion deepened when he heard laughter, Daniel's distinctive giggle, followed by a woman's voice he didn't recognize. Approaching the final stretch to the cabin, Ryder holstered his gun but kept his hand close. He dismounted and moved quietly to the side window, peering in. The scene inside stopped him cold. Daniel and Jeremiah sat at the table, faces alight with joy as they devoured slices of what appeared to be pie. And there, moving between the table and the stove, was a woman slender, with honey-brown hair pulled back in a neat bun, wearing a simple blue dress. Before Ryder could process this bizarre tableau, the cabin door swung open and Jeremiah stepped out, rifle in hand but pointed safely downward. "Pa," he called, relief evident in his voice. "You're back. We've got a visitor." At this, the woman appeared in the doorway behind Jeremiah. Up close, Ryder could see she was perhaps in her early 30s, with intelligent green eyes and a dusting of freckles across her nose. She wiped her hands on her apron and offered a tentative smile. "Mr. Zimmerman, I presume? I'm Katherine Lawson. I've moved into the old Miller place next door." Her voice held a slight Eastern accent. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion, but I wanted to introduce myself properly, and your boys were kind enough to let me wait." The old Miller place was hardly next door. It lay 3 miles east, abandoned for nearly 2 years after its elderly owner had returned to Ohio to live with his daughter. Ryder hadn't heard it had been sold. "Mrs. Lawson," he managed, tipping his hat awkwardly. He signaled to Samuel, who was watching anxiously from the hillside, then turned back to the unexpected visitor. "This is a surprise. A good one, I hope," she replied, her smile warming. "I've brought apple pie, though I'm afraid your sons have made quite a dent in it already." Inside, the cabin felt different, somehow warmer, brighter, with the sweet scent of cinnamon and apples permeating the air. Daniel looked happier than Ryder had seen him in months, chattering excitedly about a book Mrs. Lawson had mentioned owning. "When did you arrive at the Miller place?" Ryder asked as Katherine Mrs. Lawson. He corrected himself, mentally cut a generous slice of pie for him and Samuel. "Just 3 days ago," she replied. "The journey from St. Louis was longer than expected. There's much work to be done on the house, but it's sound enough to be getting on with." "You're alone." Ryder couldn't keep the surprise from his voice. A shadow crossed her face. "My husband Thomas passed away last winter, influenza." She straightened her shoulders. "I decided a fresh start was in order." Ryder nodded, understanding all too well the need to outrun grief. "Still, it's unusual for a woman to take on a homestead alone." "Perhaps," she acknowledged. "But I grew up on a farm in Pennsylvania. I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Zimmerman." There was something in her direct gaze that commanded respect, a quiet determination that reminded him of Mary. Ryder found himself nodding. Even so, it's rough country, especially now with talk of outlaws in the area. Katherine's eyes widened slightly. "Outlaws? I hadn't heard." Ryder explained about the stagecoach robbery and the suspected camp near Fork Creek, watching as she processed the information with a calmness that impressed him. No hysterics, no immediate panic, just thoughtful consideration. "That's concerning," she said finally. "But I've come too far to be scared away now." As the evening progressed, Ryder found himself increasingly intrigued by Katherine Lawson. She was well-spoken but practical, clearly educated but not condescending. She listened attentively to the boys' stories, asked Ryder intelligent questions about ranching in the territory, and shared enough of her own background to be friendly without overstepping. When she finally rose to leave, the sun had almost set. "It's too late for you to ride back alone," Ryder said firmly. "You can take my room, I'll bunk with the boys." Katherine hesitated. "I wouldn't want to impose." "It's not an imposition, it's common sense," Ryder insisted. "These hills aren't safe to navigate in the dark, especially with troublemakers about. Samuel and I will see you home in the morning." She relented with a graceful nod. "That's very kind, thank you." That night, as Ryder laid his bedroll on the floor of the boys' room, he found himself staring at the ceiling, his mind unusually active. The appearance of Katherine Lawson had shifted something in the household dynamic, brought a lightness that had been missing for years. Even now, he could hear Daniel whispering excitedly to Jeremiah about the pie, about Mrs. Lawson's promise to lend him a book of poetry she'd brought from back east. It was good to see Daniel animated instead of fearful, good to hear the boys talking about something other than chores and hunting. But Ryder couldn't shake a vague unease. A widow, alone on an isolated homestead with outlaws potentially nearby, it seemed a recipe for disaster. And yet, it wasn't his place to tell her how to live her life. Morning came, and with it the familiar routine, though altered slightly by their guest's presence. Katherine insisted on helping with breakfast, working alongside Ryder in the small kitchen with surprising efficiency. He found himself noticing things he hadn't paid attention to in years: the pleasant scent of her lavender soap, the graceful movement of her hands as she kneaded dough for biscuits, the soft humming under her breath as she worked. "Your boys are wonderful," she commented as they washed dishes together after the meal. "You've done a remarkable job raising them." Ryder felt an unexpected surge of pride, quickly followed by his usual sense of inadequacy. "I do my best. Their mother would have done better." Katherine's hands stilled. "I doubt that's true. They're respectful, helpful, and clearly adore you." She hesitated. "May I ask how long?" 5 years, he replied. "Ambush. We were moving west, got attacked just east of here." He didn't elaborate, and she didn't press. "I'm so sorry," she said simply. "Loss leaves such a void." "That it does," he agreed, surprised by how easy it felt to acknowledge this shared understanding. "Your husband was it just last winter?" She nodded. 8 months ago. "We had no children, which was both a blessing and a curse when he fell ill. No young ones to worry about, but also no one to remain for." There was a depth of loneliness in those words that resonated with Ryder. Despite having his boys, he'd felt a particular kind of isolation these past years, the specific solitude of being the only adult, carrying every burden alone. After breakfast, Ryder and Samuel saddled up to escort Katherine home. Daniel and Jeremiah begged to come along, and seeing their enthusiasm, Ryder relented. It would be good for them to know where their nearest neighbor lived in case of emergency. The ride to the Miller now Lawson place took them through a winding valley and across a shallow stream. The homestead came into view as they rounded a hill. A modest cabin with a small barn and corral, a chicken coop, and what had once been a thriving vegetable garden now overgrown. "It needs work," Katherine admitted as they approached, "but it has good bones. The roof doesn't leak and the well water is sweet." Dismounting, Ryder could see both the potential and the challenges. Miller had been a decent carpenter and the buildings were well constructed, but 2 years of Wyoming weather without maintenance had taken a toll. The corral fence was partially collapsed, shutters hung askew, and the garden was a tangle of weeds and wild growth. "You planning to farm?" he asked, surveying the property with a practiced eye. "Garden vegetables, certainly. And I brought some chickens with me from town yesterday, a starter flock from Mrs. Thornton. I thought perhaps a milk cow eventually, and maybe some goats." She looked around her property with a proprietorial pride that Ryder recognized from his own early days on his homestead. "I can make this work." "I don't doubt your determination, Mrs. Lawson, but this is a lot for one person to manage." She turned to him, a spark of something defiance perhaps in her green eyes. "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Zimmerman." Before he could respond, Samuel called out from near the barn, "Pa, come look at this." Ryder strode over to where his eldest son stood, pointing at the ground. Fresh boot prints, too large to be Miller's or Katherine's, marked the soft earth near the barn door. "Someone's been here," Samuel said quietly. "Recently." Ryder examined the prints, noting their depth and the distinctive pattern of the heel. "Keep the boys here," he murmured to Samuel, then drew his revolver and approached the barn carefully. The large door was partially open. Ryder pushed it wider with his foot, gun raised. Sunlight streamed through gaps in the roof, illuminating dust motes and the long abandoned interior. Miller's old plow still sat in one corner, and some basic tools hung on the wall, but nothing appeared disturbed. At the back, a ladder led to a small hayloft. "Hello," Ryder called. "Anyone here?" Silence answered him. He climbed the ladder quickly, sweeping the loft with his gaze. Empty, save for some moldering hay. Returning to the main floor, Ryder conducted a thorough search but found no one. Outside, Katherine waited with the boys, concern evident on her face. "The barn's clear," Ryder reported, holstering his gun. "But someone's been here all right, recently?" "Probably just curious locals," Katherine suggested, though she looked uneasy. "Mr. Thornton mentioned several people had wondered about the property being sold." "Maybe," Ryder conceded, though he wasn't convinced. "Let's check the house." The cabin's interior was modest but tidy, with Katherine's belongings already arranged to make the space homey. A small collection of books sat on a shelf, a quilt brightened the bed in the corner, and dried herbs hung from the rafters. No sign of intrusion was immediately visible. "Seems secure enough," Ryder said, relaxing slightly. "Still, I'd feel better if you had a proper lock on that door." "I have one in my trunk that hasn't been installed yet," Katherine admitted. "Thomas was always the handy one between us." "I can fix that for you," Ryder offered without hesitation. "Boys and I can stay a while, help with some repairs. It's the neighborly thing to do." The relief in her smile stirred something long dormant in his chest. "I would appreciate that more than I can say, Mr. Zimmerman." "Ryder," he corrected her. "If we're to be neighbors, might as well use my given name." "Katherine, then," she replied, her smile warming, "or Kate to friends." The Zimmerman men spent the day making basic repairs to Katherine's homestead. Ryder installed the lock, while Samuel and Jeremiah worked on the corral fence. Daniel, always more comfortable with domestic tasks, helped Katherine organize her pantry and brought water from the well. By mid-afternoon, the place already looked more lived in and secure. "I can't thank you enough," Katherine said as they prepared to leave. "I've been so focused on simply getting here that I hadn't fully considered all the work ahead." "It's nothing," Ryder assured her. "We can come back tomorrow, help with that garden. Needs to be cleared before it can be planted again." "I couldn't ask you to. You're not asking, I'm offering." Ryder surprised himself with his insistence. "Besides, the boys seem happy to help. Does them good to think beyond our own fences." Indeed, his sons had worked with enthusiasm all day, especially Daniel, who had blossomed under Katherine's gentle attention and praise. Even now, he was showing her a clever system he'd devised for storing her dried goods. As they rode home in the golden light of late afternoon, Ryder found himself contemplating their new neighbor more than was strictly proper. There was something about Katherine Lawson that intrigued him: her courage in starting fresh alone, her kindness toward his boys, the quiet dignity with which she carried her grief. "I like Mrs. Lawson," Daniel declared as they crested the hill toward home. "She knows all about books and plants and things. She makes a mighty fine pie," Jeremiah added, practical as always. Samuel, riding beside Ryder, was more contemplative. "Think she'll be all right out there alone, Pa?" Ryder considered the question. "She's tougher than she looks. But we'll keep an eye out, help when we can." The next morning, Ryder woke early as usual but found himself moving with more purpose than he had in years. After chores and a quick breakfast, they rode back to Katherine's homestead, tools loaded on the packhorse. They were halfway there when Samuel suddenly reined in, pointing toward a thin column of smoke rising in the distance exactly where Katherine's cabin should be. Pa Ryder didn't wait for the rest. "Ride hard," he shouted, spurring his horse forward. His heart hammered in his chest, mind racing with terrible possibilities. Fire was one of the greatest dangers on the frontier, whether accidental or deliberate. It could destroy a homestead in minutes. As they thundered down the final approach, Ryder was relieved to see that the cabin itself wasn't ablaze. Instead, the smoke came from a controlled burn in what had been the vegetable garden. Katherine stood nearby with a rake, directing the fire away from the dry grass surrounding the cleared area. Ryder reined in sharply, relief making his voice harsher than intended. "What are you doing?" Katherine looked up, startled by his tone. "Clearing the garden. The weeds were too thick to simply pull, and I remembered my father used controlled burning to prepare fields sometimes." "In this dry weather, with no one to help if it spread," Ryder dismounted, striding toward her. "Do you have any idea how quickly a wildfire can move in these conditions?" Her chin lifted slightly. "I've been monitoring it carefully. I have water buckets ready and I've cleared a perimeter." Indeed, Ryder now noticed the wet line she'd created around the burning area. Still, the risk had been significant. "You should have waited for us," he said, more gently now. "This isn't something to tackle alone." "I appreciate your concern," Katherine replied, a hint of steel beneath her polite tone, "but I can't wait for assistance with every task. I need to be self-sufficient." Ryder recognized the pride in her stance, the same fierce independence that had driven him to build his own place after Mary died, refusing the well-meaning offers from friends to move back east. "I understand," he conceded. "But there's self-sufficiency, and then there's foolishness. Fire's nothing to trifle with out here." The tension between them eased as they worked together to safely complete the burn and prepare the garden soil. By midday, the area was cleared and ready for planting, and Katherine's initial defensiveness had mellowed into gratitude for the help. "I've seeds for beans, corn, potatoes, and some hardy greens," she explained as they broke for a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and dried apples she'd brought from St. Louis. "Mr. Miller left some tools in the barn, though they need care." "We can sharpen those this afternoon," Ryder offered, watching as Daniel sat close to Katherine, eagerly showing her a grasshopper he'd caught. The boy seemed transformed in her presence, confident, curious, without the shadows that often haunted his eyes. As promised, they spent the afternoon repairing garden tools, reinforcing the chicken coop, and assessing what else needed immediate attention. Ryder found himself enjoying the day more than he had expected. There was satisfaction in useful work, in seeing immediate improvements in Katherine's evident appreciation. "Will you stay for supper?" she asked as the day waned. "It's simple fare, but there's plenty." Ryder hesitated, aware that accepting would cross some invisible line in their neighborly relationship. Meals shared created obligations, expectations. And yet, the prospect of another evening of his own indifferent cooking held little appeal compared to Katherine's table. "We'd be honored," he decided. "But only if you let us contribute. We brought fresh venison that could use cooking." Supper was indeed simple venison stew with the last of Katherine's travel provisions, but the atmosphere was anything but ordinary. The small cabin felt alive with conversation and laughter as the boys recounted tales from their homestead, and Katherine shared stories from her journey west. Ryder contributed little content to observe the easy rapport developing between his sons and their new neighbor. "Did you always plan to come west?" Samuel asked her as they finished the meal. Katherine's expression grew thoughtful. "Not always, no. Thomas and I had a comfortable life in St. Louis. He worked for a publishing house and I taught at a girls' school." She glanced at Ryder. But there was a restlessness in him that city life couldn't satisfy. He'd read accounts of the territories, the open spaces, the possibilities. "We just started serious planning when he fell ill." "So you came anyway," Ryder said. "Even without him?" She nodded. "It felt important to honor that dream, and perhaps I needed the challenge, something difficult enough to occupy my mind and hands." Her smile turned wistful. "Besides, there was nothing holding me in St. Louis anymore. No family, few close friends after spending so much time caring for Thomas during his illness." The raw honesty of her words struck Ryder. He recognized the impulse, the need to outrun grief by moving forward, always forward, filling each day with enough labor to exhaust the body in hopes the heart would follow. "It gets easier," he found himself saying. "Not better exactly, but more manageable." Katherine met his gaze, understanding passing between them. "Yes, that's what I'm counting on." The moment stretched, comfortable yet charged with something undefined, until Jeremiah accidentally knocked over his water cup, breaking the spell. As they prepared to leave, Katherine pressed the remainder of her apple pie into Ryder's hands. "A small thank you for all your help today." "No need for payment," Ryder protested. "That's not how neighbors work out here." "It's not payment," she corrected him. "It's gratitude." There's a difference. Riding home in the gathering dusk, Ryder found his thoughts returning to Katherine, to the graceful strength with which she carried herself, to the kindness she showed his boys, to the surprising sense of connection he'd felt during their brief conversation about loss. It had been so long since he'd spoken to anyone who truly understood. The days began to fall into a pattern. Each morning, after completing essential chores on their own homestead, Ryder and the boys would ride to Katherine's place to assist with repairs and improvements. What had begun as neighborly obligation evolved into something Ryder found himself anticipating: the satisfaction of shared work, the boys' obvious enjoyment, and increasingly Katherine's company. A week passed, and then another. The garden was planted, the chicken coop reinforced, the cabin made more secure. Katherine proved herself both capable and determined, working alongside them rather than merely directing, her hands becoming as calloused as any homesteader's. "You don't need to keep coming," she told Ryder one evening as they sat on her porch, watching the boys chase fireflies in the yard. "You've done more than enough already." "Do you want us to stop?" he asked directly. She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, I enjoy the company. And I'm learning so much from all of you." "Then we'll keep coming," Ryder said simply. "Besides, Daniel would be heartbroken to miss your reading lessons." Katherine smiled at the mention of his youngest. She discovered Daniel's love of stories and had begun teaching him to read more challenging texts from her small library. The boy was flourishing under her attention, his anxious episodes becoming less frequent. He's remarkably bright, she observed. All your boys are in different ways. Samuel has such a practical mind, and Jeremiah notices everything around him. But Daniel, he has a poet's heart. Ryder nodded, watching as the boy in question carefully caught a firefly, showing his brothers how to cup it gently without causing harm. He's most like his mother that way. Mary had that same sensitivity, that way of seeing beauty in small things. You must miss her terribly, Katherine said softly. Every day, Ryder admitted, but it's different now than it was. At first the pain was like a physical weight crushing the breath from me, now it's more like an old injury that aches when the weather changes. Present but not crippling. Katherine nodded in understanding. That's a good way to put it. I'm still at the stage where I sometimes turn to tell Thomas something before remembering he isn't there. That fades, Ryder assured her. Though sometimes, even now, I'll hear something and think, I need to tell Mary about this before I catch myself. They sat in companionable silence as twilight deepened around them. In the yard, the boys had given up their chase and were sprawled on the grass, pointing out constellations as they appeared in the darkening sky. Thank you, Katherine said suddenly. For what? For making me feel less alone. She turned to him, her profile silvered by the rising moon. For bringing your family into my life when I needed it most. Ryder felt a tightness in his chest, a complicated mix of emotions he wasn't ready to name. We needed you too, I think, he admitted. Especially Daniel. Before Katherine could respond, Samuel called from the yard. Pa, Ryder's coming. Instantly alert, Ryder stood, hand moving to his holster. Get inside, he told Katherine. Boys, to the house now. From the porch, he could see 3 horsemen approaching from the east, their forms dark silhouettes against the twilight sky. They rode with the easy confidence of men comfortable in the saddle, and even at a distance, Ryder could tell they were armed. Katherine, he said quietly as she lingered in the doorway, get my rifle from beside the chair but stay inside with the boys. She nodded and disappeared, returning moments later with his Winchester, which she handed to him before retreating as instructed. Ryder stepped off the porch into the yard, rifle held not quite pointed at the approaching riders, but ready to be raised if needed. Evening, gentlemen, he called as they drew near enough to hear. Something I can help you with. The men reined in about 20 yards away, spreading out slightly in a way that raised Ryder's hackles. The leader, a tall man with a thick red beard and what appeared to be a burned scar on his neck, touched the brim of his hat. Evening, he returned. Just passing through looking for the main trail to Cottonwood Springs. Blackwell. Ryder felt his mouth go dry, remembering Sheriff Mills's description. You're a fair piece off the main trail, he said evenly. Need to head south about 5 miles, then follow the creek west. The second rider, younger but with a similar look about him, another Blackwell brother, Ryder guessed leaned forward in his saddle. Nice little place you got here. You alone out this way? Not exactly. Ryder shifted slightly, making sure they could see both his rifle and the revolver at his hip. My sons and I are helping the lady who owns this homestead with some repairs. The third man, rail thin with a pockmarked face, spat tobacco juice on the ground. A woman running a place by herself. That's unusual. She manages fine, Ryder replied shortly. Now, if there's nothing else, it's getting late. 5 miles south, then follow the creek west. Blackwell studied him for a long moment, his gaze calculating. Much obliged for the directions. We won't trouble you further. He nodded to his companions and they turned their horses. As they rode away, Ryder remained standing in the yard until they disappeared into the gathering darkness. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding and return to the porch. Inside, Katherine was sitting with the boys at the table, her face pale but composed. Who were they? She asked as he entered. Trouble, Ryder answered grimly. I'm certain that was Blackwell and at least one of his brothers, along with another member of their gang. Samuel's eyes widened. The outlaws Sheriff Mills mentioned, Ryder nodded, and they weren't lost, they were scouting. What do we do? Katherine asked, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Ryder considered their options. First, none of you are staying here tonight. We'll all go back to my place. It's more defensible and they don't know where it is yet. But my chickens, my garden, they'll be fine for a night, Ryder assured her. If they wanted to destroy property, they'd have done it while they were here. They're after bigger game money, valuables. Katherine hesitated, then nodded. Let me gather a few things. Within 30 minutes, they were riding toward the Zimmerman ranch, Katherine on her mare beside Ryder, the boys following close behind. The night was clear but moonless, making the journey slow and careful. Ryder kept them off the main trails, taking a circuitous route through the hills to avoid any chance encounter with the Blackwell gang. Will they come back? Daniel asked in a small voice as they rode. Maybe, Ryder answered honestly. But they'll find nothing worth taking at Katherine's place, and will be prepared at ours. At the ranch, Ryder established a watch rotation with Samuel while Katherine settled the younger boys inside. The night passed tensely but without incident, and dawn broke clear and cold. I should return home, Katherine said over breakfast, though she looked reluctant. I can't abandon my place. Not yet, Ryder countered. We need to know the Blackwells have moved on first, and how will we know that? I'll ride into town, speak with Sheriff Mills. The posse may have news. Katherine frowned. Is it safe for you to go alone? Safer than bringing the boys into potential danger. Ryder turned to Samuel. You're in charge while I'm gone. Keep everyone inside, rifle loaded. Before departing, Ryder took Katherine aside. There's a hidden cellar under the pantry floor trapdoor beneath the barrel of flour. If trouble comes, get everyone down there and bar it from inside. Katherine touched his arm, her fingers warm against his sleeve. Be careful, Ryder. The genuine concern in her voice stayed with him as he rode toward Cottonwood Springs, vigilant for any sign of the outlaws. The town appeared calm when he arrived, though he noted more men than usual carrying visible firearms, a community on alert. Sheriff Mills was in his office, looking haggard from lack of sleep. Zimmerman, he greeted Ryder wearily. What brings you to town? Ryder explained his encounter with the Blackwells, watching the sheriff's expression grow increasingly grim. Damn, Mills muttered. They're more scattered than we thought. Posse tracked the main group heading north toward the Montana border, but Ifili and some others have broken off. They seemed interested in Katherine's place, Ryder said. I'm concerned they might return. Mills rubbed his jaw. It's possible they're just passing through, but I wouldn't count on it. Blackwells have a reputation for targeting isolated homesteads, especially those they think might be vulnerable. He fixed Ryder with a serious look. You should keep Mrs. Lawson at your place for a few more days, until we're sure they've left the area. She's reluctant to abandon her homestead. Better a temporarily abandoned homestead than a dead homesteader, Mills said bluntly. I've seen what happens to those who cross paths with the Blackwells. It isn't pretty. Ryder nodded grimly. I'll convince her. Any other news I should know? Just that the territorial governor has authorized a special bounty for the Blackwells after the stagecoach killing. Every lawman and bounty hunter in 3 territories will be looking for them. Mills sighed. Which might make them more desperate, not less. Riding back to the ranch, Ryder mulled over the sheriff's words. Katherine wouldn't be happy about staying longer at his place, but he couldn't in good conscience let her return home while the Blackwells remained in the area. His instincts told him they would be back. Men like that didn't casually visit isolated homesteads just to ask directions. At the ranch, he found everything peaceful. Samuel reported no disturbances, and inside the atmosphere was surprisingly domestic. Katherine had apparently channeled her nervous energy into cleaning, and cooking. The cabin was tidier than Ryder had seen it in years, and the aroma of fresh bread filled the air. You didn't need to do all this, he said as he entered, hanging his hat on the peg by the door. I needed the distraction, she replied, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. What news from town? Ryder explained what he'd learned, watching her expression shift from hope to resignation as he concluded. Sheriff Mills thinks you should stay here until we're certain they've moved on. Katherine sighed but nodded. I suppose that's sensible, but I'll need to check on my chickens and garden tomorrow, at least briefly. We can do that, Ryder agreed. Early morning, in and out quickly. That evening, as the boys helped Katherine prepare supper, Ryder found himself observing the transformed dynamic in his home. What had for years been a functional but sparse bachelor household had become something else entirely warmer, more nurturing. Katherine moved through his kitchen with natural grace, showing Daniel how to properly knead dough, laughing at Jeremiah's exaggerated stories, praising Samuel's careful attention to setting the table. More striking was the change in his sons. They seemed lighter somehow, more animated. Even Samuel, who had taken on so much responsibility at such a young age, appeared more boyish as he joked with his brothers. It's good to see them like this, Ryder murmured to Katherine as she stood beside him watching the boys. She smiled up at him. They're wonderful children. You've raised them well. They respond to you differently than to me, he observed. Especially Daniel. Children need different things from different adults, Katherine said thoughtfully. You provide security, stability, protection. I'm just offering another perspective. She hesitated. I hope I haven't overstepped. Not at all, Ryder assured her. It's been good having you here. The words felt inadequate for the profound shift he sensed, but they were all he could manage. Katherine's gaze lingered on his face for a moment, something unspoken passing between them before she turned back to supervising the boys. The following morning, they rode out at first light to check Katherine's homestead. Approaching cautiously, Ryder was relieved to find everything as they had left it, the chickens clucking contentedly in their coop, the garden undisturbed. Katherine moved quickly through her daily chores while Ryder and the boys kept watch, and within an hour, they were ready to return to the Zimmerman ranch. They were halfway back when Samuel, riding point, suddenly raised his hand in warning. Ryder immediately signaled for everyone to take cover in a nearby grove of trees. What is it? He whispered to his eldest as they dismounted. Riders, Samuel replied quietly, coming from the direction of our place. Ryder's heart sank. He peered through the trees and spotted 3 horsemen on the trail ahead, the same men who had visited Katherine's homestead. They were riding slowly, scanning the landscape as if searching for something or someone. They must have checked our place and found it empty, Ryder murmured to Katherine, who stood beside him, one hand gripping his arm. Now they're looking for us. What do we do? She asked, fear evident in her voice but her composure intact. Ryder assessed their options quickly. They couldn't return to either homestead without being seen. The nearest neighbor besides Katherine was over 10 miles away. Their best chance was to remain hidden until the Blackwells moved on, then circle back to his ranch using the less traveled routes through the hills. We wait, he decided. Stay quiet, keep the horses calm. For nearly an hour, they remained in their concealed position, watching as the Blackwells systematically searched the surrounding area. The outlaws seemed in no hurry, occasionally stopping to confer, their manner suggesting they had all day to conduct their hunt. Daniel, pressed against Katherine's side, began to tremble. She wrapped an arm around him, murmuring reassurances too low for Ryder to hear, but the boy gradually calmed under her attention. Finally, the Blackwells appeared to give up their search in this particular area. They turned their horses south toward Katherine's homestead. Ryder waited until they were well out of sight before signaling it was safe to move. They're heading for your place, he told Katherine grimly. We can't go back there now. Her face paled. All my things are just things, he finished for her. We need to get back to my ranch, gather what we need, and head for town. It's not safe out here for any of us now. The route back to the Zimmerman homestead took them on a wide arc through the hills, adding considerable time to their journey. The sun was high overhead by the time they finally approached the ranch, moving with extreme caution. Stay with the boys, Ryder instructed Katherine as they dismounted in a sheltered hollow a short distance from the cabin. I'll scout ahead. Moving silently through the trees, Ryder surveyed his property. Everything appeared normal, no horses hitched outside, no signs of forced entry to the cabin or barn. Still, he approached carefully, circling the structures before finally approaching the cabin from the rear. Inside, he found evidence that the Blackwells had indeed visited. Drawers had been opened, cupboards searched, though nothing appeared seriously damaged. They had been looking for valuables, not destruction. Satisfied that the outlaws were gone, Ryder returned to where he'd left the others. "It's clear," he reported. "They've searched the place but moved on. We need to pack quickly, essentials only, and get to town before they circle back." Inside, Katherine helped the boys gather clothing and necessities while Ryder collected ammunition and what little money he kept hidden in the house. He paused at the small wooden box containing Mary's few pieces of jewelry items he'd saved for when the boys might have wives of their own someday, and tucked it securely in his saddlebag. They were nearly ready to depart when the sound of approaching horses froze them all in place. Ryder moved swiftly to the window, cursing under his breath at the sight of the Blackwells returning, this time with a fourth man. "Get to the cellar," he ordered in a low, urgent voice. Now, Katherine didn't hesitate, shepherding the boys toward the pantry. Ryder grabbed his rifle and revolver, prepared to buy them time if necessary, but hoping it wouldn't come to that. 4 against 1 were odds he didn't favor, especially with his family at risk. The trapdoor closed just as boots sounded on the porch. Ryder positioned himself by the front window, partially concealed by the curtain, rifle ready. "Zimmerman," Illy Blackwell's voice called from outside. "We know you're in there. Come on out and we'll talk reasonably." Ryder remained silent, watching as the outlaws spread out around the cabin. "No need for this to get messy," Blackwell continued. "We just want what's valuable and we'll be on our way." The widow's place didn't have much worth taking. At the mention of Katherine's homestead, Ryder felt a surge of anger. These men had violated both their homes, threatened their safety. "Nothing worth dying over in here either," he called back. "Best move on before the sheriff's posse finds you." A harsh laugh answered him. "Posse is long gone north, chasing shadows. It's just you and us out here, Zimmerman." There was a pause. "And those boys of yours, of course. Be a shame if anything happened to them." The implied threat made Ryder's blood run cold. "You touch my sons and I'll kill every last one of you," he said, his voice deadly quiet but carrying in the stillness. "Big talk for a man outnumbered," the younger Blackwell called. "Why not make this easy? Toss out whatever cash you have, any jewelry, that fine rifle of yours, and we'll call it square." Ryder's mind raced, calculating options. He couldn't hope to hold them off indefinitely, but if he surrendered too easily, they might suspect the others were hidden and search the house thoroughly. He needed to buy time, keep them focused on him. "I need assurance you'll leave once you have what you want," he replied, injecting a note of resignation into his voice. "My boys depend on me." "You have my word as a gentleman," Illy Blackwell said, mockery evident in his tone. "Come out with your hands visible, leave the guns inside." Taking a deep breath, Ryder set his rifle aside but kept his revolver holstered beneath his long coat. He stepped onto the porch, hands raised to shoulder height, presenting the image of a man reluctantly surrendering. The Blackwells approached cautiously, weapons trained on him. Illy, clearly the leader, gestured for one of his men to search Ryder for weapons. The pockmarked man approached, roughly patting him down but missing the revolver concealed by the coat. "Inside," Illy directed, motioning with his gun. "Let's see what you're so anxious to protect." Ryder had no choice but to comply, praying the cellar trapdoor was well enough hidden beneath the flour barrel. He led them into the cabin, watching as they began to ransack his home more thoroughly than before. "Where's the cash?" the younger Blackwell demanded. "Every rancher keeps emergency money somewhere." "Cookie jar," Ryder said, nodding toward the kitchen. It wasn't a complete lie, he kept a small amount there for everyday use. The larger sum was already in his saddlebag, along with Mary's jewelry. The man checked the jar, pocketing the few dollars he found with a look of disappointment. "Not much to show for all this land. Ranching's not as profitable as robbery, apparently." Ryder remarked dryly, earning himself a glare from Ellie. "Watch your mouth," the outlaw leader warned. "My patience has limits," he scanned the cabin. "Where are the boys and the widow? Tracks show they've been here." "Town," Ryder lied smoothly. "Sent them this morning when we saw your dust on the horizon yesterday. Sheriff Mills is expecting them." Ellie's eyes narrowed in suspicion. "That's so." "Then why didn't you go with them?" "Someone had to stay with the stock," Ryder replied. "Besides, I figured you might pay a visit, wanted to be here to protect what's mine." The fourth man, who had been methodically searching the bedrooms, emerged with a small leather pouch. "Found something," he announced, tossing it to Ellie. Hidden in the mattress, Ellie opened it, revealing a gold pocket watch Ryder's father's, one of the few family heirlooms he possessed. The outlaw smiled coldly. "Now we're getting somewhere. What else are you hiding, Zimmerman?" The search continued, growing more destructive as the outlaw's frustration mounted at finding little of significant value. Ryder watched with carefully controlled anger as they tore through his possessions, all the while hyper-aware of the flour barrel in the pantry, beneath which his sons and Katherine huddled in terrified silence. The younger Blackwell emerged from the boys' room, holding Daniel's small wooden horse, a carving Ryder had made for his birthday. "Not much loot in this place," he complained, tossing the toy aside carelessly. "Told you," Ryder said, watching the wooden horse skitter across the floor. "We live simply." Ellie studied him thoughtfully. "Maybe the value here isn't in possessions," he mused. "Word is you were cavalry once. A man with those skills might be useful." Ryder stiffened. "I'm not interested in joining your gang, Blackwell." "Wasn't exactly offering membership," Ellie replied with a cruel smile. "More like forced guidance. Territory patrol schedules, best trails north, that sort of thing." "I've been out of the cavalry for 15 years, Ryder said. "Any information I had is long outdated." The pockmarked man had made his way to the pantry and was poking through the shelves. Ryder tensed, watching as the man's boot came perilously close to the edge of the flour barrel. "Not much food here either," the man commented, kicking the barrel lightly. It shifted slightly but remained upright, the heavy flour sack on top preventing it from moving too far. Ryder forced himself to maintain a neutral expression, though his heart hammered in his chest. "Been meaning to get to town for supplies." A sudden commotion outside drew everyone's attention, the sound of approaching horses, multiple riders moving at speed. The outlaws exchanged alarmed glances. "Check it," Ellie ordered the pockmarked man, who moved swiftly to the window. "Riders," he reported tensely. 6, maybe 7, armed." "Posse?" the younger Blackwell asked, fear evident in his voice. Ellie cursed. "Thought you said they were heading north," he spat at Ryder. "I said that's what I heard," Ryder replied calmly, hope surging within him. "Guess news travels fast when the Blackwell gang is about." Ellie's face contorted with rage and indecision. After a tense moment, he seemed to reach a conclusion. "We're leaving," he announced to his men. "But this isn't over, Zimmerman, not by a long shot." The outlaws moved quickly to the door, guns still trained on Ryder. "Don't follow us out," Ellie warned. "Stay inside for 5 minutes or the first bullet will find you." Ryder remained motionless as they backed out of the cabin, then listened as they mounted hurriedly and galloped away, taking a route that would lead them away from the approaching riders. Only when their hoof beats had faded did he move to the pantry, shifting the flour barrel to reveal the trapdoor. "It's safe," he called softly, lifting the heavy door. Katherine emerged first, her face pale but composed, followed by the boys. Daniel launched himself into Ryder's arms, while Samuel immediately went to check the window. "It's Sheriff Mills," he reported with relief. "And Mr. Jensen, Mr. Thornton, others from town." Ryder set Daniel down gently and moved to the door, stepping onto the porch as the posse approached. Sheriff Mills raised a hand in greeting, reining in his horse. "Zimmerman, you all right? We got word the Blackwells were heading this way." "Just left," Ryder confirmed, indicating the direction. 4 of them heading southeast. Mills nodded to several of his men, who immediately broke off in pursuit. He dismounted, approaching Ryder. "Everyone's safe. We're all fine," Ryder assured him as Katherine and the boys joined him on the porch. "How'd you know to come? Mrs. Thornton sent her boy to fetch me when Mrs. Lawson's chickens showed up at their back door this morning," Mills explained with a slight smile. "Said something must be wrong if she'd abandoned her flock. We gathered men and rode out immediately." Katherine looked startled. "My chickens, but they were in their coop when we checked." "Blackwells must have let them loose after we left," Ryder surmised. "Probably out of spite." "Fortunate for us they did," Katherine replied, a hint of humor returning to her voice despite the tension of the day. "I never thought those hens would save us." That evening, with two of Mills's deputies remaining on guard outside, they assessed the damage to the cabin. The Blackwell's search had left a considerable mess, but nothing irreparable. Together, they set about restoring order, righting furniture, gathering scattered possessions, sweeping up broken crockery. "Will they come back?" Daniel asked as he helped Katherine fold clothing the outlaws had tossed from drawers. Ryder exchanged a glance with Katherine before answering. "Sheriff Mills doesn't think so. They know there's a posse looking for them now, and there's not enough here to justify the risk." The boy nodded solemnly, but didn't look entirely convinced. Katherine knelt beside him, gently turning him to face her. "Daniel, I was very impressed with how brave you were today," she said. "Staying so quiet in that cellar couldn't have been easy." Daniel's expression brightened slightly. "You helped. You told me to imagine we were playing hide and seek, and I just had to be better at hiding than anyone else." Katherine smiled, smoothing his hair. "And you were. The very best." Later, with the boys finally asleep after the exhausting day, Ryder and Katherine sat at the kitchen table, mugs of coffee between them. Outside, the night was quiet save for the occasional movement of the deputies patrolling the perimeter. "What happens now?" Katherine asked softly. Ryder considered the question. "Mills says it's safe for you to return to your place tomorrow. He'll send a deputy to check on you regularly until they're certain the Blackwells have left the territory." She nodded, staring into her coffee. "I've been thinking. Perhaps I was too hasty in my decision to homestead alone, having second thoughts about the West." Ryder asked, surprised at how much the idea of her leaving troubled him. "No, not about the West," she clarified. "Just about doing it entirely on my own." She looked up, meeting his gaze directly. "These past weeks, being here with you and the boys, it's shown me what I've been missing. Not just help with physical labor, but companionship, purpose beyond mere survival." Ryder felt something shift in his chest, a loosening of a tightness he'd carried for years. "The boys would miss you terribly if you left," he said cautiously. "Only the boys." She asked, a hint of challenge in her green eyes. Ryder took a deep breath. "No," he admitted. "Not only the boys." The confession hung between them, momentous yet somehow natural, as though they'd been moving toward this point from the day she'd arrived with pie in hand. "I don't want to replace Mary," Katherine said softly. "Just as you could never replace Thomas, but perhaps there's room for something new, something different but equally valuable." Ryder reached across the table, taking her hand in his. Her fingers were work-roughened now, no longer the smooth hands of a city schoolteacher, but they fit perfectly within his own. "There's more than room," he said. "There's need, not just for the boys, but for me." He hesitated, then continued with honesty that surprised even himself. "I've been half alive these past years, Katherine, going through the motions, fulfilling my promise to Mary to raise our sons, but not truly living, until you knocked on our door." Katherine's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but her smile was radiant. "That pie was the best decision I ever made," she whispered. The following morning, they rode to Katherine's homestead together, accompanied by one of Mills's deputies. The place was in disarray from the Blackwell search, though not as badly damaged as they had feared. The chickens, remarkably, had all returned to their coop after their brief adventure to the Thornton farm. As they worked to set things right, Ryder found himself observing Katherine with new awareness. The way sunlight caught in her hair as she bent to gather scattered belongings. the determined set of her jaw as she righted furniture, the gentle patience with which she instructed Daniel in the proper way to replant seedlings the outlaws had trampled. "What are you thinking?" she asked, catching him watching her. Ryder smiled. "That you belong here," he said. "Not just in the West, but here, with us." Later that evening, as they prepared to return to the Zimmerman ranch, Katherine hesitated at her door. "I should stay here tonight," she said, though she sounded reluctant. "Deputy Collins is outside and everything's secure now." Ryder nodded, understanding her need to reclaim her space after the invasion. "We'll come back tomorrow," he promised. "Start rebuilding what was damaged." She smiled up at him, then made a decision, stepping forward to place a gentle kiss on his cheek. "Thank you, Ryder, for everything." He caught her hand as she began to pull away, his heart pounding with a vigor he hadn't felt in years. Slowly, giving her every chance to retreat, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers, a kiss as tender as it was momentous, carrying the weight of shared understanding and newfound hope. When they parted, Katherine's eyes were bright with emotion. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "Come early." The weeks that followed brought a gradual merging of their lives. Katherine spent most days at the Zimmerman ranch, returning to her own homestead in the evenings with one of the boys as escort, usually Daniel, who treasured the time alone with her. Word of the Blackwell's capture in Montana Territory reached them in late summer, bringing a collective sigh of relief to the entire community. The immediate danger had passed, but the experience had crystallized something important for both Ryder and Katherine: the recognition that life was too precarious, too precious to waste in solitary endurance when companionship was possible. On a golden September evening, as they sat on Ryder's porch watching the sun sink behind the mountains, Ryder finally found the courage to ask the question that had been on his mind for weeks. "Katherine," he began, suddenly nervous as a boy despite his years, "I'm not one for flowery speeches, but I need to ask." He took her hand in his. "Would you consider making this arrangement permanent, joining our family officially?" She turned to him, eyes luminous in the fading light. "Are you asking me to marry you, Ryder Zimmerman?" "I am," he confirmed. "The boys need a mother, especially Daniel, and I—" He paused, searching for the right words. "I need a partner, someone to share this life with, its hardships and its joys." He squeezed her hand gently. "I know it's not been long since Thomas, and if you need more time," Katherine stopped him with a finger to his lips. "Time doesn't matter as much as certainty," she said. "And I am certain, Ryder, about you, about the boys, about this place being where I belong." His heart swelled with emotion he couldn't quite name: joy, relief, gratitude, all mingled together. "Is that a yes?" "It's a yes," she confirmed, her smile brighter than the sunset behind them. Their wedding, held in Cottonwood Springs' small church 2 weeks later, was a simple affair attended by neighbors, townsfolk, and of course, the boy's Samuel standing tall and proud beside his father, Jeremiah grinning with undisguised delight, and Daniel practically glowing with happiness as he presented the rings on a small pillow Katherine had sewn specially for the occasion. "Never seen those boys so spruced up," Harold Thornton commented as the community gathered for the celebration afterward. "Or your place so tidy, Zimmerman," Ryder laughed, watching as his sons helped Katherine serve cake to the guests. "Amazing what the right woman can accomplish." "With a pie, no less," Sheriff Mills added with a knowing smile. "Heard that's how she got her foot in the door." As the festivities continued, Ryder found a moment alone with Katherine, drawing her away from the crowd for a brief moment of privacy. "Happy?" he asked, studying her face for any hint of reservation. Katherine's smile was answer enough, but she added words as well. "More than I ever thought possible again," she said. "When Thomas died, I believed that chapter of my life was closed forever. I never imagined." She gestured toward the boys, who were now engaged in an animated conversation with Doc Weber. "I never imagined finding a family again." Ryder understood exactly what she meant. After Mary's death, he had resigned himself to a life of duty without joy raising their sons as promised, but expecting no further happiness for himself. Katherine's arrival had changed everything, bringing light back into their home and hope back into his heart. "You saved us," he said simply. "All of us," she shook her head, leaning into his embrace. "We saved each other." In the years that followed, their family grew and flourished. The two homesteads were gradually connected by a well-worn path as they maintained both properties, expanding their operations to include more cattle, a larger garden, and eventually, a small orchard. Katherine's apple pies became legendary throughout the county, requested at every social gathering and charitable event. Daniel, under her patient tutelage, discovered a talent for teaching that eventually led him to become Cottonwood Springs' schoolmaster. Jeremiah's affinity for the land developed into expert ranching skills, while Samuel's practical mind turned toward law, eventually joining Sheriff Mills as a deputy. And on crisp autumn evenings, when the work was done and twilight gathered around their home, Ryder and Katherine would often sit together on the porch, her head resting against his shoulder, his arm around her waist, watching as the stars appeared one by one in the vast Wyoming sky. In those quiet moments, both would silently acknowledge the strange twists of fate that had brought them together: grief and courage, danger and determination, and a freshly baked pie that had opened the door to healing for them all.